The sun filtered through the leaves of the sprawling oaks lining Maple Lane, casting playful shadows on the well-manicured lawns of the neighborhood. Among these homes stood a quaint little house, adorned with whimsical lawn decorations that had been lovingly collected over the years by my grandparents, Mary and Frank. They had lived here for nearly 4 decades, their lives interwoven with the community's history. Every summer, the yard transformed into a vibrant display of colorful gnomes, twinkling lights, and cheerful garden signs that told stories of family milestones and cherished memories. To an outsider, I appeared to be just another member of this suburban enclave, a young adult navigating life after college while still tethered to my childhood roots. But beneath this ordinary facade lay a hidden truth: I was the secret owner of the very homeowners association that governed our neighborhood. The power to enforce rules and regulations rested in my hands, yet I chose to remain anonymous, observing from the sidelines. This world of manicured lawns and strict guidelines seemed mundane, yet it held significant weight in the lives of many residents. Little did they know, my connection to this place ran deeper than mere ownership. It was about family, loyalty, and a growing anger against an HOA that had crossed a line too far. The day the eviction notice arrived felt like a punch to the gut. My grandparents, who had always filled their yard with love and laughter, were now facing the harsh reality of the HOA's ruthless enforcement. A small group of board members, armed with a long list of regulations, had deemed their cherished lawn decorations excessive. They claimed that the array of gnomes, flamingos, and seasonal displays violated the community's aesthetic standards. It started innocently enough. An anonymous complaint led to a formal inspection. Within days, my grandparents received a letter outlining their supposed violations and a warning that failure to comply would result in eviction. I could see the shock in their eyes as they read those cold words. For them, those decorations were not just ornaments, they were symbols of family gatherings, of joy and history. They had spent years curating this quirky garden, pouring their hearts into each piece. As the HOA tightened its grip, I felt an insidious anger bubbling within me. This was more than just an attack on my grandparents' home, it was an assault on their very spirit. With each passing day, I watched helplessly as they tried to negotiate with the board, only to be met with indifference. The thought of losing their home lit a fire in me, a fire that would soon ignite into something much bigger. The homeowners in Maple Lane often whispered about the HOA, an organization that had transformed from a community governing body into a tyrannical force. Once intended to maintain neighborhood harmony, it became infamous for its draconian rules and arbitrary enforcement. Residents knew better than to push back, the consequences could be swift and severe. Just last summer, the Johnsons had been fined for having their trash cans visible on non-collection days, a punishment that felt incredibly petty. Then there was the case of Mrs. Thompson, who had dared to paint her front door a shade too vibrant for the board's liking. The HOA wasted no time in issuing a citation, forcing her to repaint it in muted tones that stripped away her home's personality. Stories like these circulated around block parties and neighborhood gatherings, morphing into cautionary tales about the HOA's overreach. As I observed my grandparents' eviction unfolding, I couldn't shake the thought that they were merely the latest victims in a long line of unreasonable actions taken by an organization drunk on power. For too long, the board had operated with impunity, wielding its authority like a blunt instrument. This time, however, they had gone too far. They had targeted my family, and I could no longer stand by as they trampled over lives with their rigid rules and self-righteousness. It was time to take action against this overzealous HOA. Behind the facade of my everyday life lay a secret that weighed heavily on my shoulders: I was the owner of the homeowners association. Few knew my true identity, and that anonymity had been a shield, allowing me to observe the community without influence or bias. I had taken on this role out of a desire to preserve the charm and character of Maple Lane, but as I witnessed the board's increasingly tyrannical actions, that intention began to morph into something darker. The eviction of my grandparents felt like a personal betrayal. They had dedicated their lives to this neighborhood, nurturing friendships and contributing to its spirit. When I learned about their eviction, I was torn between protecting my family's legacy and maintaining the delicate balance of authority within the HOA. Remaining hidden allowed me to gather information and assess the board's actions without revealing my hand. But with each passing day, my frustration deepened. The very organization I owned was being wielded as a weapon against those who simply sought to express themselves. It gnawed at me, igniting a fire within, a need for justice not only for my grandparents but for every resident who had suffered under the board's heavy-handed rule. The time had come to step out of the shadows and reclaim control over a situation that had spiraled out of reason. The news of the eviction hit my grandparents like a storm, leaving them reeling and lost in the very home they had built a life in. I watched as my grandmother, usually so vibrant and full of laughter, sat in silence, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. For her, each lawn decoration held a story, a gnome named Gerald from their first trip to the beach, or the shimmering fairy lights that illuminated family gatherings during summer nights. This was more than just a house, it was where they celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and countless holidays. My grandfather, typically stoic and composed, struggled to hide his frustration as he paced their living room. The sense of helplessness he felt gnawed at him, a bitter reminder that their beloved home was now at the mercy of an organization that seemed indifferent to their history. As they faced the prospect of leaving behind everything they cherished, I could see the weight of their despair pressing down on them. This emotional turmoil reverberated through me as well. I felt a fierce loyalty to my grandparents, a burning desire to protect them from this injustice. Their pain became my own, igniting a resolve within me. The notion that a group could strip away the essence of what made a home left me unsettled. I vowed then, in the depths of my heart, that I would fight for them and restore what had been unjustly taken away. As I paced the familiar path through Maple Lane, I wrestled with a storm of emotions. My grandparents' eviction had ignited a fire within me, but taking action against the HOA board felt like stepping into uncharted territory. My heart raced at the thought of confronting them, yet fear clawed at me, fear of exposing my identity and the power I held. If they discovered my connection to the HOA, it could lead to chaos, and my grandparents would remain vulnerable. I envisioned the next HOA meeting, a battleground where tensions would run high. The thought of sitting at that table, facing the very people who had callously targeted my family, both exhilarated and terrified me. How could I confront them without revealing that I was their puppet master? I needed a strategy, one that would allow me to speak out while maintaining my anonymity. I began crafting a plan, considering how to gather evidence against the board's overreach without drawing attention to myself. Perhaps I could present as a concerned resident, leveraging support from others affected by their harsh rules. I imagined rallying neighbors to speak out against the board's tyranny, creating a united front that could not be ignored. But even as I plotted, uncertainty gnawed at me. Would they listen? Would this really make a difference for my grandparents? The stakes were higher than ever, and I knew I had to act decisively to protect my family and reclaim our home. Determined to rally support, I began discreetly reaching out to neighbors who had also felt the oppressive weight of the HOA's strict rules. I started with casual conversations during morning walks and weekend gatherings, carefully gauging their experiences. It didn't take long for me to discover that many residents shared similar frustrations, overzealous fines, unreasonable restrictions, and a palpable fear of the board's authority. One evening, I invited a few like-minded residents over for coffee under the pretense of discussing neighborhood improvements. As we exchanged stories, it became clear that the board's heavy-handed tactics had created a culture of fear. The Johnsons spoke about their fine for having a garden that was deemed too wild, while Mrs. Thompson recounted her own struggles with the color of her door. With each shared experience, a sense of camaraderie blossomed among us. Feeling the energy shift from frustration to resolve, I proposed that we band together and attend the next HOA meeting as a united front. The idea sparked enthusiasm, residents began voicing their support, and soon we were strategizing how best to present our grievances. I could see hope igniting in their eyes, a collective determination to reclaim our community from the board's grasp. As we prepared to confront the HOA together, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was more than just my family's fight, it was about standing up for all of us. As the date of the HOA meeting approached, I knew I had to act quickly and strategically. My position as the owner of the HOA provided me with unique access to board meetings and internal discussions. I decided to use this influence to subtly undermine the board's authority, planting seeds of doubt about their decisions. During a regular meeting, I casually brought up the recent eviction of my grandparents, framing it as a concern shared by many residents. I asked pointed questions about the rationale behind such strict enforcement of lawn decoration rules, emphasizing how they affected community spirit. Is this really what we want our neighborhood to represent? I posed, watching as board members exchanged uneasy glances. In the days that followed, I made it a point to engage individual board members in conversation. I would casually mention how residents were talking, how they felt the HOA was losing touch with what made Maple Lane special. We should consider what our neighbors value, I suggested, encouraging them to think twice before taking further action that could alienate homeowners. Slowly but surely, cracks began to form in their unwavering confidence. Board members who once stood resolutely began questioning their own decisions, unsure if they were truly representing the community's best interests. With each planted doubt, I felt my resolve strengthen, change was on the horizon, and soon the board would have no choice but to reconsider their approach. The night before the HOA meeting, tension buzzed in the air like static electricity. I had spent weeks laying the groundwork, gathering support from fellow residents and subtly eroding the board's authority. Now, it was time to turn the tables and confront them directly about their overreach. As I reviewed my notes, a mix of excitement and anxiety churned in my stomach. I envisioned the scene, board members sitting at their long table, their expressions a mix of confidence and arrogance. This time, however, they wouldn't have the upper hand. I had organized our group of supporters to attend, each armed with their own stories of unfair treatment, ready to voice their grievances. This was no longer just my battle, it was a collective stand against tyranny. As I prepared for my moment, I practiced my speech in front of a mirror, ensuring my words would resonate with both the board and the audience. I wanted to call attention not only to my grandparents' eviction but to the broader pattern of oppression that had gripped our community. Each point I made would be backed by evidence gathered from other residents, photographs of fines, recorded conversations about unfair rules. As I lay in bed that night, sleep eluded me. My heart raced as I thought about the power dynamics at play. Tomorrow could be a turning point for Maple Lane, and I was determined to seize this opportunity to reclaim our neighborhood from the clutches of an overzealous HOA. The atmosphere in the meeting room was electric, charged with anticipation as residents filled the seats, murmuring among themselves. I stood at the front, my heart pounding in my chest, ready to confront the board that had caused my family so much pain. As I began to speak, I felt the weight of all the eyes upon me, neighbors eager for change and board members bracing for resistance. I outlined the grievances that plagued our community, detailing my grandparents' eviction and the countless stories of injustice shared by others. The board members fidgeted nervously, their confident facade beginning to crack. Just as I sensed their unease, I took a deep breath and prepared to deliver the bombshell. Before we continue, I said, pausing for dramatic effect, there's something you all need to know about me. The room fell silent, curiosity piqued. I am not just another resident here, I am the owner of this HOA. Gasps echoed around the room as jaws dropped in disbelief. The board members exchanged bewildered looks, their authority suddenly hanging by a thread. You've used your power to bully and evict without regard for this community's spirit, I continued, my voice steady now. That ends today. The shock rippled through the attendees, and I could see hope dawning in their eyes. This was a turning point. The tables had turned, and I was ready to reclaim our neighborhood from the grip of tyranny. The atmosphere in the meeting shifted from tension to disbelief as whispers of my revelation circulated among the attendees. With the board now on the defensive, I seized the moment to take swift action. Effective immediately, I am reversing my grandparents' eviction, I declared, my voice firm and resolute. The room erupted in surprised gasps, but I pressed on, determined to restore their dignity. I reached into my bag and pulled out the official eviction notice, tearing it in half right before their eyes. "This letter no longer holds any weight," I proclaimed, feeling a rush of exhilaration wash over me. The relief on my grandparents' faces was palpable as they exchanged astonished glances, disbelief giving way to joy. "Together," I continued, addressing both the board and my neighbors, "we can reshape this community into a place where creativity and individuality are celebrated rather than stifled." The room buzzed with a newfound energy as residents nodded in agreement, emboldened by the change that was finally within reach. I glanced at my grandparents, tears of happiness brimming in their eyes. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of triumph, not just for them but for everyone who had been wronged by the board's overreach. This was a turning point for Maple Lane, a restoration of not only home but also of family pride and community spirit. The battle wasn't over, but today marked a significant victory against tyranny. In the days following the confrontation, the atmosphere in Maple Lane shifted dramatically. The board members, once so arrogant in their authority, now faced a reckoning. As word spread about my revelation and the reversal of my grandparents' eviction, residents began to voice their frustrations more openly than ever before. The community was energized, ready to demand accountability for the board's previous actions. I initiated an emergency meeting to address the concerns of the neighborhood, inviting all residents to participate. The turnout was overwhelming. Neighbors who had once felt silenced now filled the room with passionate voices calling for change. I proposed a new governance structure that would prioritize transparency and community involvement. It was time to dismantle the oppressive regime that had ruled for too long. As tension mounted, board members squirmed in their seats, realizing they had lost the support of the very community they claimed to represent. Discussions turned heated as people recounted their own experiences of unjust fines and arbitrary enforcement. By the end of the meeting, it became clear that significant changes were needed. In the aftermath, several board members resigned, unable to withstand the pressure from their fellow residents. A new committee was formed, composed of diverse voices committed to fostering a sense of unity and creativity in our neighborhood. The shift in governance marked a new era for Maple Lane, one where every resident's voice could be heard, and where individuality was celebrated rather than suppressed. As I stood in my grandparents' yard, now vibrant with their beloved lawn decorations once again, a wave of reflection washed over me. The events of the past few weeks had been a whirlwind, revealing the complexities of power and responsibility within our community. I had witnessed firsthand how authority could be wielded to oppress rather than uplift, and it became clear that true leadership required a commitment to justice and empathy. In the face of adversity, I learned that standing up for what is right often meant challenging established norms. The experience deepened my bond with my grandparents, who embodied resilience and love throughout this ordeal. Their unwavering support had given me the strength to confront the HOA and reclaim our neighborhood. Now, as I watched them smile among their cherished decorations, I felt a profound gratitude for their presence in my life. Power should never be a tool for intimidation, it must be a means to empower others. With the new governance in place, I realized that fostering a sense of community was about collaboration and shared values. We had transformed a narrative of fear into one of unity and hope. As I embraced my grandparents, I promised them, and myself, that I would remain vigilant, ensuring that no one else would endure what they had faced. This journey had taught me not only about the importance of family but also about the collective strength we hold when we unite against injustice. Together, we would ensure that Maple Lane thrived as a place where everyone could flourish. As I reflected on the transformation of Maple Lane, a profound sense of pride welled up within me. Our journey had illuminated the incredible strength that resides within a community when its members unite for a common cause. The power of collective action had proven to be a formidable force against authoritarian structures that sought to dictate and control. The eviction of my grandparents had served as a catalyst, awakening not just my own resolve, but igniting the spirits of many neighbors who had long felt silenced. We learned that when individuals come together, their voices can echo louder than any oppressive rule. The newfound energy in our community was palpable. Residents were now engaged, empowered, and ready to advocate for fairness. This experience underscored an essential truth, that we all share the responsibility to protect our spaces and support one another. It is vital to challenge unjust systems and ensure that every voice is heard, no matter how small it may seem. As I stood among my neighbors, I felt a renewed commitment to fostering this spirit of collaboration. Together, we would create an environment where creativity flourished and individuality was celebrated. Our story serves as a reminder to others facing similar struggles. When you stand united, you can dismantle barriers and build a community where everyone thrives. Let our victory inspire others to rise up, advocate for fairness, and transform their neighborhoods into places of inclusion and respect.